Welcome back to 5280 Sports Network. I'm Shawn. That's Jake Marsing. We were out here today at the Broncos practice, which was light to say the least. No pads, just shorts and hats. Our friend Joel Dreesen calls that a hat day practice, like Shannon used to have. Basically, after yesterday's rather spirited practice where we saw Chris Harris and Emmanuel Sanders basically throw down and take half the teams with it, this maybe seemed like the right day for Gary Kubiak to pump the brakes a little bit and slow things down.
Well, absolutely. And with the San Francisco 49ers coming into town for two fully padded practices in the next 2 days, this was absolutely the day to slow things down, and they did considerably. They finished before 11 o'clock, which is only about an hour and a half of practice, realistically speaking. By far the shortest practice of camp. Some interesting things happened. We saw Trevor Siemian throw an interception today. Guys continue to progress in these position battles. But, you talk with Jordan Norwood, as I did, and he said, we need days like this every once in a while. It helps us recharge, refocus, and get ready for the 49ers coming into town tomorrow.
Well, this is usually one of the 2 or 3, depending on the year, the most exciting practices of the year when another team, and it's generally the 49ers that come into town. The Broncos play the 49ers almost every year in the preseason. Coming into these practices in this game, of course, the big news, Vance Walker done for the year with the ACL. Guy was expected to fill in and take Malik Jackson's job. That was going to be big shoes to fill anyway. Now we're looking at having to go one row deeper. Jared Crick's probably first up, and then interestingly, Adam Gotsis, the Australian with a minimum amount of experience in American football, is probably going to be pressed into action sooner than anyone expected. How do you expect that to look, at least in these 2 practices, if not the game?
Well, I think that the Broncos, Gary Kubiak said during his press conference today that he's not worried about the defensive line depth now. He used the key word now. He's not worried about it yet, but I'm sure he wants to see how Jared Crick, how Adam Gotsis come out and play here against San Francisco in the next few days. It's going to be critical. Like you said, they were expecting Vance Walker to be the guy for them to replace Malik Jackson. And a torn ACL out for the year, a tough break for him, and a really tough break for Bill Kollar on this defensive line.
On the bright side for the Broncos, if there is a bright side, it's not for Vance Walker, of course, that this line is deep. This defense is deep. Even though you're thinking of that Malik Jackson position from last year being filled, there are a lot of guys that can fill it, and there are a lot of creative ways that it can be filled. We're talking about Crick, we're talking about Gotsis. There's also the possibility guys like Shane Ray played with a hand down at time when he was with Missouri. There are ways to mix and match this defense. I don't think it's a big blow for them when you look at the Broncos on the whole, although it does diminish their depth. Injuries happen to everyone. This makes them a little thinner on that line. Flipping over to the offense now. The preseason games have a lot to do with it. The quarterback battle, of course, is in full force, although I don't have any idea who's really winning it. Yeah. It's a moment-to-moment proposition. But when these 2 practices happen and the game, how do you expect this to change, if at all?
I think that these next 2 weeks, really week and a half, will determine who wins this job. I think Gary Kubiak privately would like to have a good idea of who his starting quarterback is going to be by the 3rd preseason game to help him determine those reps. Trevor Siemian, probably the best one out here today, even though he did throw an interception to Lorenzo Doss. But Mark Sanchez continues to it's not that he's been awful, it's just that he hasn't claimed the job that everybody thought was going to be his. He needs to be able to separate himself in these preseason games. Gary Kubiak said he's not sure who's going to start on Saturday against the 49ers yet. We'll probably expect to hear that tomorrow or Thursday, but either way, whether it's Siemian or it's Sanchez, one of these guys eventually has to do something to take claim of this job and make it theirs.
It seems like that's what they're looking for, because right now the Broncos look at their quarterback battle and it's essentially looks like it's about to be claimed by someone by default, and that's certainly not the way you want to do it, especially as the defending Super Bowl champs. So we'll take a close look at that. It seems to me that if Siemian doesn't get the start, such as it is, on Saturday, then maybe we don't really have a competition. Despite what it looks like, despite the fact that I think, along with a lot of folks out here, that Simeon's been the best quarterback in camp from essentially day one, if he doesn't get the start for the 49ers, is it realistic to expect that they're just going to go with Sanchez until at least the wheels fall off?
I think that's fair. I think if you see Sanchez start this game, he'll wind up starting September 8th against the Panthers. And whether that's really a judgment on how Siemian has looked in camp or how Sanchez has looked, I think isn't the case. Ultimately, that's going to be a judgment based on Gary Kubiak's own decision-making and maybe hedging his bet a little bit. And because if you decide not to start Mark Sanchez, if you decide to start Trevor Siemian, then what's the point of even having Mark Sanchez on this roster? Starting Sanchez, even if he's not necessarily been the best guy in camp, could help them hedge their bet a little bit so that if Sanchez fails, you go to Siemian, then you go to Lynch before you have to pull out the rookie.
And of course, keep in mind that standing for the next couple days on the sideline on this field is a guy that many people thought would be here in the first place, Colin Kaepernick. Of course, he's not. He's still with the 49ers, and he's embroiled in his own quarterback battle. So a lot to see from those positions. These will be the next fun couple days of camp. They're usually very spirited, very exciting leading up to the game on Saturday. For Jake Marsing, I'm Shawn. This is 5280 Sports Network.